My name's Elizabeth Pierce, and I was a practicing attorney for many years before retiring in 2019. I was originally trained as a mediator in the 80s when I was in law school. And then later when I was home with my kids for 5 years when they were little, I was a court mediator in DC. But since I retired, I've been focusing my mediation training and work with the Conflict Resolution Center.
Wonderful. So obviously it seems like you've already had like a long history of, career correlated with conflict resolution and mediation just in general. So how do you feel, since you've already had such a long journey within conflict resolution, how do you feel that your personal values align with the principles of mediation?
Well, the one thing that I really believe is that people should have agency and they should have an opportunity to decide the direction of their life and the direction of how they're going to respond to important things that happen in their lives. And I believe that mediation puts people in a position to take action in their own life and make decisions about their own lives. I also believe that it's very important to try to approach life without bias and looking at things in a neutral fashion. And that's something that has certainly been ingrained in my training as a mediator. It can sometimes be hard, as you can imagine. But it is sort of a fundamental premise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would agree. And I think that many of your fellow mediators who have already come in would also agree, as you all have shared similar responses and thoughts when it comes to, like what you've already mentioned as far as like the importance of neutrality, and that, one of the mediators has spoken it as of like having to have an open mind, that in mediation, you are not in a position to be deciding nor providing the solutions for those who are involved. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we are coming from a completely different perspective, and it can be a very new feeling, especially when we talk about our own lives, where of course we want the control and the say in what the solutions might seem best fit for us, but obviously we're not there to provide that. Right. But also going off of what you already said, important to provide those involved with the powers who obviously guide themselves to their own solutions and whatever they see as the greener side of their conflicts. Would you be able to share with us so far with your journey a memorable experience from your early days as a mediator?
Boy, I think one of my very earliest mediations was truly one of the most challenging that I've ever been involved in. It involved two neighborhoods that were warring against each other about a zoning issue. And I was amazed at the vitriol and anger that people brought to this, and the willingness to really people to go after each other. Now, what made this dispute, what made the mediation process so helpful, and it's the same one that is used at the Conflict Resolution Center, was that I was one of a panel of mediators. And as you know, in the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County, the mediation model usually involves two mediators. So even when you have a very frightening situation like that, and maybe it was frightening because I was quite young. I was quite a bit younger than most of the people who were involved in the issue. But I had other co-mediators. So, pardon me, we back each other up when we get a little stuck and we don't have ideas about how to move forward. Often our co-mediator will have an idea that helps move things along.
Sure. So, I definitely think that is something new that has been shared. I think you might be the first mediator who's come in and really expressed the positives of the idea of like having a team of mediators, or just someone alongside you to help you along the way. Mm-hmm. I know that a fellow mediator had shared a story of his that he had been under the impression that one of his early mediations was going to be easy because he saw it as a business test, so he didn't think that there was going to be any emotions involved. But little did he know that was not close to even being true. So by the time that he sat down at the mediation, there was a lot of emotion involved.
Well, you're reminding me actually of something that I was involved in as a mediator that was a very small business transaction gone awry, where one might think, okay, there's not going to be a lot of emotions here. But in this particular mediation, really what was needed the most was a simple apology. The dispute had gone on for many, many months, and people were so incensed, and I think there was a real disbelief when we all got together that they could possibly have any movement. But the mediation process created a safe space for one of the participants to sincerely apologize to the other, and that it made all the difference in the world. I mean, something that had gone on for months the impasse was resolved, and they were able to move on and resolve it that day.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that just goes to show that, through mediation, you can really discover, when it comes to the parties obviously having a hard time dealing with the conflict prior to coming to mediation. And then, in the setting of mediation, both parties, or however many parties involved, having to be able to share their feelings and their expressions, and then really getting down to whatever the needs that they're looking to actually have, satisfied, what they're hoping to achieve, what values they feel might have been ignored, just a long range of different things that, could really be contributing to the conflict, aside from what, might it seem on the surface. Would you say that there were any challenges or surprises that you didn't anticipate when you first started out as a mediator?
I think what was a surprise in the beginning and continues to be a surprise is how many times people don't know about mediation and don't know about what it has to offer. So when I'm having a social conversation about this volunteer work, people will automatically assume that I'm mediating marital disputes or maybe a labor dispute, because our culture that mediation has been used prominently and loudly in those disputes. But I'm always amazed at how many times it just does not occur to people to consider doing mediation. I mean, there's so many opportunities. We see a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor disputes at the Conflict Resolution Center. As you mentioned, small business disputes, disputes that actually are already within the legal process. A lot of people don't understand that. They think that, oh dear, a lawsuit has been filed. Now there's no process. We're on a track and we can't do anything about it. But that's another instance where it can be helpful. It can be helpful in the schools. The Conflict Resolution Center also recently allowed me or helped me get trained to do police mediation disputes, where a citizen has lodged a complaint with the police. So there's any manner of instances when people can use mediation, and I'm always amazed when I mention, someone will tell me about a conflict and I'll ask, oh, well, have you thought of, I'm surprised that it hasn't even occurred to them, because we're so lucky here in Montgomery County to have access to these free services provided by really very highly trained mediators, and it's all free. So I'm constantly surprised about how often I have to educate people about the availability of mediation and what it can offer.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. I would even say that I would probably, before I came here, would have fallen into that category, because I had no idea what even mediation was, or, the fact that was even a different methodology for conflicts. So it was definitely something new, but from what I know now, obviously, it's definitely something that is very useful and resourceful, and can definitely create a lot of change for a lot of different people, for a wider range of, conflicts, and between any sort of demographic, where we talk about adults or even youth. So it can be helpful in many different areas and a very impactful resource. So would you be able to tell us now, so far in your journey, if there's been a specific turning point or a moment that significantly impacted your approach or perspective towards mediation?
Well, I guess I mentioned in the very beginning that one of the things I believe in, and I've always believed in, is the need, when you're involved in a dispute, whether you're a participant or the mediator, in keeping an open mind. But I was recently struck when I had the police mediation training, which was a 40-hour training, and really had us dive deep into who we are and what practices we might use to resolve police complaints. And I was very surprised at my own biases. I was not expecting that. In fact, as I mentioned, I've been doing mediation in some form or another, off and on, for many years. And I thought I sort of had that nailed. And the training that I received right from the get-go really helped us think long and hard about where we might have biases that we could possibly bring to a mediation. So that's what I would say is a more recent surprising experience, is the fact that you need to keep checking that. You need to stay aware and keep checking that. And that, I think, again, is part of the training that we get at the Conflict Resolution Center. There are continual opportunities to hone in on that and be reminded of how important that is.
Sure. I think that's definitely a very important message, especially because I want to say that so far that's also been something that I don't think I've actually heard mentioned from fellow mediators. I don't think that, that aspect of, the growth and reflection process of, being a mediator over time, how those sorts of things can reappear and like really show themselves to us over time. I don't think that's been something that's been addressed, but definitely important. And I would say definitely a part of the many processes of mediation just as a whole, obviously with the many different experiences that come through and different forms of mediation that there are, those kinds of things will definitely show themselves. And it's up to us to kind of like navigate through that when it does come about. So in your opinion, what makes mediation a crucial aspect of conflict resolution?
Well, one thing I like about it that I think distinguishes it and is very important is the amount of creativity that is that participants are encouraged to delve into. So there is a process in every mediation where we encourage the participants to brainstorm about different ideas to resolve the dispute. They are encouraged to come up with wacky ideas, throw anything at the wall. They're not promising they will do that. They're not agreeing to do that, but it just gets the ideas cooking. And it's something that I think makes mediation distinct and really lovely, because it really asks people to dig deep and to try to be creative to resolve their issues. And again, as well as putting it right in their hands to solve it. So if you go to the court, you're going to be looking at whatever the judge thinks the few options are and whatever the law allows. But in mediation, there's a lot of room for creativity for the participants, and that's something that we encourage them to do as a normal part of our process. We encourage them to think deep and hard and wide for ways that they might resolve the dispute, thinking out of the box, so to speak.
Sure. I mean, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what I mentioned earlier, as far as like when one of the mediators mentioned that open-mindedness and, really seeing what solutions those involved can come up with. And in like what you said, as far as like, it can be very creative. What one might think if they were to insert themselves, even though obviously we're not supposed to, we're not allowed to, into the conflicts that are presented, one might think of a certain solution yourself, but obviously as mediators, we're not in a position for that. But to see what everyone is capable of considering their own solutions is definitely wonderful. I
mean, I think that what's, and I've sort of alluded to this earlier, I feel like our most important job as mediators is to create a safe space for people to think broadly. And I think that we do that pretty well. The process facilitates that.
Definitely. So our last and final question. Is there a message that you would like to convey to individuals considering a career or journey in mediation?
Well, I guess I would say that, and this is something that when my training was reestablished after I retired at Montgomery College, I took my training there, is the fact that everything that you learn in mediation training, you can use everywhere. You can use all over. So even if you have concerns or reservations about whether you could make mediation your career, solely your career, everything that you would learn when you're learning mediation skills is transferable everywhere in your life. No matter what job you're in, you're going to find yourself in a conflict with a colleague or a boss or, client, any number of situations. And the skills that you learn as a mediator will help you be better at resolving your own disputes and also resolving the disputes of those around you.
Definitely. I would 100% agree that what is learned and what is experienced in mediation is something that can translate to many different areas personally, and also just as the progressions of a mediator in general.
Well, one of the things I'd say is this is reiterated too in my more recent training, is how mediators, when they're working together, can model a means of interacting that can be helpful to the participants.